Whether as a hitter or a pitcher, Jody Hennigar was feared by almost every softball player who faced him. A left-hander with a tremendous drop ball, he was a 6-time American Softball Association Most Valuable Player and Pitcher. He was twice an All-Canadian Most Valuable Pitcher. As a hitter, he was an intimidator. Let's allow Mark Smith to tell you what Jody's batting skill was like, and Mark should know he's a Hall of Fame member who also had an international reputation as a batter and a pitcher.
Jody was the type of guy that when he came to the plate, people paid attention, and if you were somewhere else in the ballpark, you generally paused to come to the fence and have a look at the at-bat because you might get to see something special. Jody could hit the ball a long way, and he could hit the ball a long way against anybody. And you always were concerned that when he came to the plate that, you know, he was in scoring position when he stepped in the batter's box. And there's not a lot of hitters that you could say that about. But I think earlier on in his career, he probably combined the power and average well. I think as he got older, he developed into more of a power threat, but somebody that didn't strike out much. You know, he was a hitter that normally was going to move the ball, and he was going to move it solidly against most pitching. So he wasn't a guy you like to see coming to the plate when the game was in the balance.
Rand Kellogg, the coach-owner of the Halifax Windsor Keiths team for which Jody pitched at the 1998 Canadian Championships in St. Croix near Windsor, also has great praise for Jody's hitting.
There were lots of good hitters that could hit in many types of pitchers and be good hitters. Jody Hennigar could hit the best pitchers in the world, and I think some of them actually feared him when he came to the plate. Many times he would often get nothing to hit. He would just get walked because he was such a feared hitter.
It seemed wherever Jody went, championships followed. He was on 4 World Championship teams, won 2 Pan American Games gold medals with Canada, won a Canadian Senior Men's Championship, and was on a Halifax Olympic Bingo Canadian Midget Boys title team. Jody spent 21 years in international softball at the International Congress and International Federation levels. He played in Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and New Zealand, as well as many towns and cities in the U.S. and Canada, places like Washington, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, St. Joseph, Missouri, Clearwater, Florida, Denmark, Kimberley, and Madison, Wisconsin, and of course Canadian centers like Saskatoon, Summerside, and St. Croix. At 6'1", 240, Henniger was described this way by Dan Pattison, a longtime sports writer who worked in Salt Lake City and for the Sporting News, USA Today, and is now a commissioner with the ISC. Here's what he said. Pitchers see him coming to the plate, and right away, they're reaching for their bottles of ibuprofen, buried next to their rosin bags on the mound. He's so strong that when he couldn't find a parking space for his Volkswagen, he just picked it up and carried it around with him. Jody was what you might call a vagabond softball player. He went where he was wanted and needed, always in demand, and always a star. Rand Kellogg has this to say about Jody.
He was an elite player. He was an elite person. He was he had that kind of ability to put a team on his back and carry them in, and for the team to rally around that. So he definitely, that's why he was so sought after.
Like many a great Nova Scotian, Jody was a quiet champion, and he certainly had his routine.
We got off the airplane, came to the ball field, put his gear on, and this guy's walking into the field with his bag over his shoulder, kind of sauntered in, picked a spot at the end of the bench where he always sat and always did sit, and took his seat pad out, his cushion, and sat it down, and Jody's idea of warming up wasn't like probably most guys. He kind of sauntered down on the sideline and did his thing and come back, and we got down early in the game in the first inning. I think we were down 2 or 3 runs, and I'll never forget all the guys had anticipated Jody Hennigar because he was quite famous in the softball world at the time. He put his arm pad on and went up to the plate. We had a couple of runners on base, and he proceeded to hit one right over the first pitch, right over the beer tent in center field, and talk about a wow factor with all the guys and the team that kind of just looked at each other, and it went on positive from there.
Denny Bruckert coached Jody in his final season of competitive ball, 2005, with Circle Tap of Denmark, Wisconsin. In a letter to the Hall of Fame, Denny writes, One of the highlights of my career was being able to coach Jody that year. He was super to coach and well-loved, admired, and respected by his teammates. He got a hit in his final at-bat at Worlds, and early in that year, after both his fellow pitchers went down, Jody pitched 3 games in the final day to take us to the championship game. Here's Rand Kellogg once again about the fire within Jody Hennigar.
The number one thing that made him good was the ticker, was the heart. He had a tremendous attitude. He was fiery at all times, intense. You could just see it in his eyes that every time he went to bat or went on the mound to pitch, he was probably the most intense player that I've ever been associated with. So I think that aside from having the natural skills and the abilities as a pitcher and as a hitter, as a ball player, he had just such an intense attitude that was, I think, probably one of his biggest features. He didn't say much. He was a very quiet guy until you got to know him well, and he enjoyed being around the guys. He enjoyed having a good time. He enjoyed the game. He was very well respected in the softball world, so we couldn't go anywhere that people didn't know him, and he had a lot of friends. So you always knew that he was very popular, how popular he was. They didn't just respect him as a player. I always believe they respected him as a person as well, because I never heard anybody say a bad word about Jody Hennigar.
Mark Smith played with and against Jody for many years. Among his fond memories was coaching Jody with Team Canada and seeing the fire and pride of playing for his country. Jody was a member of the national team for 9 years, winning 3 gold medals and 2 silvers at World and Pan Am competitions.
Things that is so important to most players is the chance to represent your country. And regardless of where he lived or what the circumstances were, when Team Canada came calling, he was always there, and he was always one of the players that was looked to during his tenure to be a leader. 1992 comes to mind, of course, when we won a world championship, and he and I played together on the national team for the one and only time. And actually, it was his 3-run home run in the 5th inning that tied the game, and my double in the 8th that won the game. So it was a pretty neat experience for the two of us to have contributed to international success for Canada. But Jody has always been there for Team Canada when he was called upon.
One of the most memorable moments for Jody and for Team Canada was at the ISF Championship in Manila. Jody homered in the bottom of the 7th to win the gold medal for Canada, a game observers call the other Thrilla in Manila. Another Jody highlight was at the 1992 Worlds, called on to pinch hit for Canada in the 8th inning of the title game. Jody stroked a 3-run homer to tie it. Mark Smith talks about Jody's value as a pitcher and hitter.